Shane Tucker's phone was dying when he noticed the woman in heels eyeing his charging spot like her life depended on it. He glanced down at his daughter in the stroller. Beside him, 3-year-old Hope was asleep, her tiny head tilted to the side, pink blanket clutched in one fist. Shane exhaled, unplugged his phone at 3%, and stood up. "Here, you can take it," he said, offering the outlet with a half smile. The woman blinked, surprised. "Are you sure?" "Yes, I've got enough juice to get through boarding," he lied. He didn't. He was running on fumes in every sense: his phone, his wallet, his patience. The airport gate was loud, packed, and his flight to St. Louis was delayed. Again. She hesitated, then smiled. "Thank you, that's really kind of you." She looked expensive. Not in a flashy way, but everything about her, from the rose gold suitcase to the tailored cream coat, screamed money. She sat beside Hope's stroller and plugged in her phone, glancing at the sleeping toddler. "She's beautiful," she said gently. Shane nodded. "Thanks, it's been a long day." "I can imagine, traveling alone with a child. You deserve a medal." He chuckled. "I'd settle for a quiet flight." She laughed softly, and it hit him her voice was warm, like something you wanted to wrap yourself in. Her eyes were even warmer, deep brown and curious. "I'm Blair," she said, holding out her hand. "Shane." Her hand was soft, her grip confident. She didn't let go too quickly. That caught him off guard. "So Shane," Blair said, tilting her head, "where are you headed?" "St. Louis, job interview." She raised a brow. Flying out with a toddler for a job interview, that's dedication. "Yeah, well, when you've been laid off for 6 months and your savings are gone, you kinda start getting creative." Her gaze flickered to his scuffed boots, the fraying strap on Hope's diaper bag, the $2 coffee cup beside his seat. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "Don't be, it's life. I've got her, that's what matters." Blair looked at Hope again, a strange softness in her expression. "You're a good dad." Shane didn't know what to say to that. Compliments made him uncomfortable. Praise felt like a distant memory. A boarding announcement echoed through the terminal. Blair's gate was being called. "That's me," she said, unwrapping her charger cord. "Safe travels," Shane said, already lowering himself back into the seat. But she didn't get up immediately. "Hey," she asked, "what's your last name?" He blinked. "Tucker, why?" She smiled like she'd just made a decision. "No reason, just, good luck with your interview, Shane Tucker." Then she was gone, heels clicking away through the gate tunnel. He didn't expect to see her again. But 3 days later, sitting in a cheap motel room with Hope watching cartoons and his stomach growling from skipping lunch, his phone buzzed an unknown number. "Mr. Tucker," a woman's voice said. "This is Rachel, assistant to Blair Whitmore. She said you were looking for work." He nearly dropped the phone. "Blair's Whitmore," he echoed. "Yes," the woman said politely. "She owns Whitmore Group. She'd like to interview you for a project manager position. Are you available this afternoon?" Shane stared at the screen. The Whitmore Group was one of the biggest logistics firms in the Midwest. He'd sent them his resume 8 times over the past year. No response. Until now. Yeah, absolutely. I'm available." "Great, she'll see you at 4. The car will be outside your hotel at 3:30. He hung up and looked at Hope, who was now trying to feed her stuffed giraffe a goldfish cracker. "Okay, baby," he whispered. "Looks like Daddy's got one more shot." Blair's office was in a downtown high-rise with floor-to-ceiling windows and an actual waterfall wall behind the reception desk. Shane tried not to sweat through his one good shirt. Blair stood when he entered. She wore a navy blue dress, simple and clean, and her hair was pulled back in a sleek ponytail. She looked different from the airport sharper, more polished, but her smile was the same. Hi, Shane, she said. Thanks for coming. He blinked. You own Whitmore Group. I do. His mouth opened, closed, opened again. You. I didn't lie, she said with a small shrug. You never asked what it did. She motioned for him to sit, and he did, still stunned. I looked over your resume, she said. You've got solid experience. You were a team leader at Canton Freight. Yeah, 7 years, until they downsized. I know. My company acquired one of their smaller branches 2 months ago. He stared at her. So, this interview is real, she said firmly. I'm not offering you a handout, Shane. I'm offering you a job because you're qualified. And because I saw the kind of person you are, the way you gave up your charging spot without blinking, the way you take care of your daughter. That's the kind of man I want at my company. He swallowed hard. I don't know what to say. Say yes. He did. And 2 weeks later, Shane was sitting in a new apartment in the city, watching Hope chase Bubbles in the living room when Blair knocked on the door. She didn't come empty-handed. There was a giant stuffed bear tucked under one arm and a white box in the other. A welcome gift, she said, grinning. He took the box and opened it. Inside was a tiny pair of designer sneakers for Hope and a sleek new phone for him. Blair, I can't. You can, she said. Let me. He looked at her, really looked at her. She wasn't just beautiful, she was generous, sharp, funny, and she'd opened a door when no one else even saw him standing there. Why are you doing this? He asked quietly. She shrugged, because I believe in you. And for the first time in months, Shane felt something crack open in his chest. Hope toddled over, wrapped her arms around his leg, and looked up at Blair. Hi, she said shyly. Blair knelt down, smiling. Hi, sweetheart. Hope nodded solemnly. You're pretty. Blair laughed, eyes shining. Thank you, so are you. Shane watched them, something warm blooming in his chest. He didn't know what this was. But he knew he didn't want it to end. Hope's rubber duck sailed across the tub like a tiny yellow missile, splashing water onto the floor Shane had already mopped twice. He crouched beside the tub, towel draped over one shoulder, one hand steadying his daughter while the other fished out the floating shampoo bottle she'd mistaken for a submarine. Okay, Captain Chaos, he said. Bath time's officially over. Hope giggled and reached for the duck again, but Shane scooped her up, wrapping her in a hooded towel patterned with tiny zebras. She thrashed playfully in his arms, shrieking with delight. Daddy, no towel jail. I'm the warden, sweetheart, he said, kissing her damp cheek, and you're sentenced to pajamas and bedtime. By the time she was dried, dressed, and tucked into bed with her favorite giraffe, Shane's phone buzzed on the kitchen counter. He picked it up, still wearing socks that didn't match and a shirt damp from bathwater. The voice on the other end was calm and direct. There's a fundraiser tomorrow evening, Children's Literacy Initiative. I'm heading the board this year. Come with me. He hesitated, pressing the phone between his shoulder and ear. Blair, I don't own anything even close to fundraiser appropriate. I know, that's why I sent something to your building. It should be downstairs with the doorman. Shane looked toward the door, then back at Hope's room to make sure she was asleep. You sent me clothes. I sent you options, pick one. I'll have a car waiting at 7. The line disconnected before he could say anything else. Downstairs, the doorman handed him a cream-colored garment bag and a shoebox with his name printed on the tag in elegant script. Shane carried them up like they were made of glass. Inside the bag was a midnight blue suit tailored within an inch of its life. The shirt was crisp, the tie a rich burgundy. The shoes gleamed like they'd never touched a sidewalk. He held up the jacket and stared at it for a long time. By the time the black sedan pulled up outside his building the next evening, Hope was already asleep under the watchful eye of his neighbor, Mrs. Kurtz, a retired teacher who'd taken to mothering them both ever since she found out Shane cooked pasta 3 nights a week because it was cheap. Blair was already in the car when he slid into the seat beside her. Her dress shimmered like moonlight, subtle but unmistakably expensive. Her hair was swept back in soft waves, and a pair of diamond earrings glinted whenever she turned her head. "You clean up nicely," she said without looking at him. "You didn't give me much choice." "Well, if I've learned anything about you, it's that you function well under pressure." He adjusted his tie, the fabric unfamiliar and stiff. "Just try not to auction me off to the highest bidder tonight." She turned then, eyes sharp. "You're not here to impress anyone, just be yourself." Shane let out a breath. "That's the part I'm worried about." The venue was a glass-paneled rooftop overlooking the skyline. Waiters floated between guests with trays of champagne and truffle canapés. Shane kept his hands in his pockets, nodding politely when someone greeted Blair and tried not to look like a misplaced extra in a movie. Blair introduced him to a few people, but each time she did, she used the same phrase. "This is Shane Tucker. He's with Whitmore Group now." No mention of how they met, no explanation, just quiet inclusion. They made their way to the edge of the rooftop, where the city glittered like 1,000 possibilities. Shane leaned against the railing, letting the night air settle around him. "I'm guessing this isn't your usual Friday night," she said beside him. "I'm usually elbow-deep in macaroni and cheese, and a bedtime story about a squirrel that eats too many jelly beans." Blair laughed, a genuine sound that softened her features. "That sounds better than this." He glanced at her, then why do it? She looked out at the skyline. "Because sometimes you have to be visible to make things change. Money only matters if you're using it for something." Shane was quiet for a moment. "Hope doesn't have a library at her daycare, just a basket of torn picture books. She keeps asking me why the pages are scribbled on." Blair turned to him, something shifting in her face. "Then we'll build them one." He blinked. "What?" "We'll start a fund for early childhood literacy. In her daycare's name, you'll oversee it." "I'm not," he stopped, jaw tightening. "I'm not a charity case, Blair." "I know that," she said. "This isn't about charity. It's about what kind of world we want our kids to grow up in. And you're not a case, you're a partner." That word caught him off guard. Partner. Before he could respond, a man approached them. Tall, immaculately dressed, with a cologne that hit a second before he spoke. "Blair, was hoping I'd find you." She tensed, barely, but Shane saw it. "Elliot," she said, her voice cooler now, "didn't expect to see you here." Elliot's smile didn't reach his eyes. "Always support your causes, even when I'm not invited." He turned to Shane, extending a hand. "Elliot Carlisle, Venture Capital." Shane shook it, firm but brief. "Shane Tucker." "Ah," Elliot said, eyes flicking to Blair. "This your newest project?" Blair's jaw twitched. "He's an employee and a friend." Shane stepped forward slightly, voice calm. "You always talk to people like they're auction items." Elliot chuckled, "Just making conversation." Blair touched Shane's arm, gently but firmly. "Let's get some air." Once they stepped away, she let out a long breath. "Ex-boyfriend?" Shane asked. "Worse, ex-fiancé." He blinked. "Wow." "Got tired of answering his phone for him while he was busy forgetting my birthday." Shane didn't push, but something tightened in his chest. Not jealousy, something older, protective. They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the city beneath them. "You didn't have to bring me tonight," he said finally. "I did," Blair said, her voice quiet now. "I wanted you to see where you belong." He looked at her, really looked, and something unfamiliar coiled in his chest. Because for the first time in a long time, he wasn't thinking about what he didn't have. He was thinking about what he might be building. The wind bit through Shane's coat as he stepped out of the Whitmore Group headquarters late Friday afternoon, the streets below buzzing with impatient taxis and the glint of city lights blinking to life. He adjusted the strap of Hope's backpack on his shoulder, her tiny voice chattering away behind him as she clutched a new book Blair had brought by during lunch, a hardcover with embossed lettering and glitter on the pages. "She said the girl goes to space," Hope said, gripping his hand tightly as they walked toward the subway entrance. "But not in a rocket, she builds wings." Shane smiled, keeping his eyes on the crowd. "Sounds like a smart girl." "She has goggles and a pink cape," Hope added, eyes wide. He nodded, crouching to zip up her coat against the cold. "Then she's ready for anything." That night, after Hope fell asleep curled into her giraffe pillow, Shane sat at the kitchen table with a legal pad, a pen, and a half-empty cup of stale coffee. Numbers stared back at him. Rent, groceries, childcare. Even with his new salary, things were tight. Better, but still tight. A gentle knock at the door broke his focus. He opened it to find Blair, her cheeks pink from the cold, holding a paper bag that smelled like garlic and rosemary. "I figured you probably haven't eaten anything that wasn't frozen or microwaved this week," she said, brushing past him into the apartment. He closed the door behind her. "It's not that bad." She raised an eyebrow and lifted the lid on the takeout container, revealing roasted chicken, mashed potatoes, and grilled vegetables. "Okay," he admitted. "Maybe it's exactly that bad." They sat on the couch with their plates balanced on their knees. The television was off. Hope's toys were scattered across the rug. The air felt warmer than it had an hour ago. "Did you always know you wanted to start your own company?" Shane asked between bites. "No," Blair said, spearing a carrot. "I was supposed to take over my father's. He built a commercial real estate empire. By the time I was 16, I could calculate square footage faster than I could do algebra." "What changed?" "He died, sudden heart attack. I was 22. She didn't pause. I inherited controlling shares, but I didn't want to lease buildings to chain stores for the rest of my life. I wanted something that moved something alive. So I sold half and used the capital to build Whitmore Group." Shane set down his plate. "That couldn't have been easy." "It wasn't," she said. "Every boardroom thought I was a spoiled girl playing executive. Had to rip the table apart and rebuild it just to get anyone to listen." He studied her in the low light. "You ever regret not staying in the empire?" "No," she said, "but sometimes I regret never getting to ask him if he would have been proud." Silence settled between them, not awkward, just full. "I think he would have been," Shane said quietly. Blair didn't respond, but she reached over and touched his hand. Her fingers lingered. The apartment door creaked open an hour later when Mrs. Kurt stepped inside, returning from her book club. She gave them both a knowing look and went straight to her room, humming. Blair stood, smoothing her coat. "Come to the gala next Friday." He blinked. "The one with the press wall and the black tie tickets that cost more than a month of daycare." "I'm on the board. I get a table," she said, slipping on her gloves. "Bring Hope, it's family inclusive." "You want me to bring a 3-year-old to a gala?" "She'll love it. There's a violinist, a chocolate fountain, and a magician." "She's going to think it's her birthday." Blair smiled. "Good, let her." She paused at the door. "You belong there too, Shane." He watched her go, the scent of her perfume lingering in the air like a memory he didn't want to forget. The next week moved like a blur. Hope practiced twirls in her socks for the fancy party, as she called it, while Shane tried not to panic about wearing a tuxedo in front of people who owned private jets and stock portfolios. When the night arrived, Blair sent a car with a car seat already installed, leather, spotless, and calibrated to Hope's height. The driver opened the door, greeted them both by name, and handed Shane a velvet box. Inside was a cufflink set, platinum, engraved with the letters ST. Hope's dress was a soft yellow, layered with tulle and tiny embroidered stars. Blair had it delivered earlier in the week with a note that simply said, "Every star deserves to shine." The gala was held in a ballroom above a historic theater downtown, the ceiling painted with constellations, the floor a sea of evening gowns and tailored suits. Chandeliers sparkled like ice. Blair found them as soon as they entered, her gowns slashed with silver in clean, dramatic lines. Her heels clicked once and then stopped as she crouched to Hope's level. "You look like a princess," Blair said. "I'm not a princess," Hope replied solemnly, eyes huge. "I'm an astronaut girl with wings." Blair laughed and took her hand. "Even better." The night unfolded in soft, surreal waves. Shane shook hands with CEOs. A senator complimented Hope's shoes. Blair introduced him as her guest and didn't flinch when people raised their brows. By the time dessert arrived, Hope was fast asleep in his lap, chocolate smudged on her cheek, one hand still gripping her plastic wand from the magician's set. Blair leaned in from her seat beside them. She made it almost 3 hours. That's a record. She only fell asleep because she danced too hard to the string quartet's version of Let It Go. Blair's eyes softened. She's happy. Shane looked down at his daughter, then at the woman beside him. "She is." He hesitated, then added, "I haven't seen her this happy in a long time." Blair didn't say anything. She didn't need to. When the evening wound down, she walked them to the car, her arm brushing Shane's in the quiet hush of the valet circle. "Thank you," he said, voice low, "for tonight, for all of it." She looked up at him, the city lights reflecting in her eyes like something electric. "I didn't do it for thanks." "Then why?" Blair reached up, hand resting lightly on his chest. "Because I care about you." The words hit him like a current, unexpected, sharp, real. He didn't kiss her. But he wanted to. And she looked like she wanted him to. Instead, they stood there in the cold, caught in a moment that hadn't broken yet. The first snow of the season arrived in fine, drifting threads that laced the sidewalks in white by morning. Shane stood at the window of his apartment, watching Hope press her fingers to the fogged glass, breath puffing against the pane as she whispered a quiet wow. He tightened the belt of his robe, feeling the deep calm of a Saturday with nowhere to be. But the stillness didn't last long. A knock sounded at the door, 2 sharp taps, nothing hesitant about it. He opened it to find Blair, cheeks flushed from the cold, holding a thermos in one hand and a folder tucked under her arm. "Hot cocoa," she said, handing him the thermos, "and a proposition." Shane took it, stepping aside to let her in. "You always bring both, don't you?" "I like to think ahead." Hope turned from the window, squealing when she saw Blair. She ran to her without hesitation, arms out. Blair crouched and scooped her up without missing a beat, her laugh muffled in Hope's hair. "I made a snow angel with my face," Hope declared. "That sounds like advanced technique," Blair said, completely serious. Shane watched them for a moment before nodding toward the folder. "What's the pitch?" Blair set Hope down and handed him the folder. Inside were architectural mock-ups, budget estimates, and a projected timeline. "A literacy center," she said. "In the West End, the city's donating the land. I want you to run it. Design the layout, hire the staff, oversee the build. You'll have your own team, full control." He stared at the pages, then looked up. "You want me to leave Whitmore Group?" "Not leave, expand. This'll be under the same umbrella, but it's yours." Shane flipped through the plans, pages heavy with possibility. "Why me?" "Because you already know what it's like to live without access," she said. "And because trust you to build something that actually matters." Hope came over and tugged on his sleeve. Will there be books with dragons? Shane looked down at her, then at Blair. There better be. She smiled but said nothing more. She didn't need to. The following weeks unfolded in small, deliberate steps. Shane submitted his resignation from his project manager role and immediately accepted the new position leading the initiative. Blair didn't hover. She let him make decisions, even when they surprised her. When he chose a small, underfunded local firm to handle the design because of their outreach work with at-risk teens, she just nodded once and asked when the first meeting was. They spoke daily, but it wasn't always business. Sometimes she called him just to share something funny she'd overheard. Other times he called her to tell her Hope had discovered the existence of marshmallows in cereal and was now planning a campaign to get them into every meal. But one Thursday evening, she didn't pick up. Shane tried again, nothing. By Friday morning, her assistant said she had canceled all meetings and wasn't responding. Something in his gut twisted. He dropped Hope at Mrs. Kurtz's and caught a cab across the city. Blair's building had a concierge desk, but the woman behind it recognized him and let him up without question. He knocked once, then again louder. When she opened the door, she looked like she hadn't slept. Her hair was tied back messily, and she wore a sweatshirt that hung off one shoulder. Her eyes were red. She stepped aside silently, and Shane stepped in. "Talk to me," he said. She didn't speak right away. She walked to the window, arms crossed, the city below them shrouded in gray. "It's my father," she said finally. "Today's the anniversary." He said nothing, waiting. "I spent years being angry that he built something for himself and left me to maintain it. But then I realized. I've done the same thing. I've built walls. I've kept people out. And now, when I want to let someone in, I don't know how." Shane stepped closer. "You've let me in more than you realize." She turned, her voice cracking. "I don't want to be the person who only gives. I want someone who stands beside me, not behind, not beneath, beside." He reached for her hand. "Then you've already found him." She looked at him, eyes wet but steady. "Are you sure? This world is messy, complicated. People will talk." "Let them," he said. "They haven't seen you reading bedtime stories to Hope or showing me how to order wine without looking like an idiot. They haven't seen the woman who builds entire futures and still stops to tie a toddler's shoelace." She laughed, shaky but real. "I'm not perfect." "Good," he said. "Neither am I." She stepped into his arms then, and he held her, the silence between them finally comfortable. That spring, the Literacy Center opened its doors with a ribbon cutting that drew more children than adults. Hope wore a dress covered in tiny rocket ships and announced to the crowd that she would one day build her own library on the moon. Blair laughed and clapped the loudest. Later that night, after the speeches and the music and the endless photos, she pulled Shane aside, her heels kicked off, her hair windblown from playing tag with Hope in the courtyard. "I have one more gift," she said. He raised an eyebrow. "You've already done enough." "It's not for you, not exactly." She handed him a small envelope. Inside was a certificate of incorporation. "The Hope Foundation," he read aloud. "Literacy and early development grants," she said. "You'll be the face of it. I'll just be the funding." He looked at her stunned. "You named it after her." "I named it after what she represents," Blair said. "What you both represent." He didn't trust himself to speak. Instead, he kissed her. It wasn't tentative. It wasn't uncertain. It was everything that had built between them, every choice, every moment, every word that had led to this. When they pulled apart, she whispered, "I love you." He held her tighter. "I love you too." Hope ran toward them then, waving a balloon sword. "Look, Daddy, I'm a knight." Blair laughed and knelt to her level. "Then protect your kingdom, brave girl." Hope nodded solemnly and charged off again, her laughter echoing across the stone walls of the courtyard. Shane looked at Blair, his heart full. "I never thought I'd have this," he said. "A family, a purpose, all of it." She reached for his hand. "You gave up a charging spot. I gave you everything else." He smiled. "I think we're even." She tilted her head. "Not quite." "Why not?" "Because I still haven't proposed." He blinked. "You what?" Blair pulled a small ring box from her pocket. Inside was a simple platinum band. "For Hope, for you, for us." He laughed, stunned, overwhelmed. "You're serious?" "I want to build every day with you." He took the ring, slid it on. "Then let's start tonight." They walked back into the crowd, hand in hand, as the sun dipped low behind the city skyline, casting everything in gold. Hope danced ahead of them, her cape flapping behind her like wings. Shane adjusted the collar of his shirt as he paced outside the sun-drenched conservatory, the scent of early summer roses drifting through the air. Hope's voice rang out behind the glass, calling out flower names with the enthusiasm of someone discovering each one for the first time. Inside, Blair knelt beside her, helping her arrange wild blooms into tiny glass vases for the reception tables. He watched them through the doorway, his fiancée and his daughter, sunlight catching in their hair, and couldn't quite believe this was real. A year ago, he'd been rationing peanut butter sandwiches and hoping for a callback. Now he was planning a wedding that didn't just include hope, it revolved around her. "Stop pacing," came a voice behind him. He turned to find his sister, Rowan, leaning against the garden wall, arms crossed and hair tied up in a messy bun. She was wearing a navy jumpsuit and a skeptical expression. "I'm not pacing," Shane said. "You're practically carving a trench into the stone path. You sure you're not freaking out?" He scrubbed a hand through his hair. "I'm not freaking out, this is all a lot." Rowan softened. "It's a lot of good." He nodded, glancing toward the conservatory again. "Keep worrying, I'm going to wake up." She stepped closer and nudged his shoulder. "You're awake, and you deserve all of it." Shane exhaled slowly. "I used to think, had to keep my world small to survive. Then Blair came in and handed me something bigger than I ever thought I could hold." Rowan tilted her head. "And you didn't drop it." He smiled at that. "Not yet." Inside, Blair stood and waved him in. "Come here. Hope wants your opinion on the centerpiece for the kids' table." Shane walked in, and Hope immediately pulled him toward a table covered in sunflowers, mismatched buttons, and glittery pipe cleaners twisted into heart shapes. "Which one looks happiest?" she asked, holding up two vases. Shane crouched beside her. "This one, it's got the biggest smile." Hope beamed. "That's what I said." Blair leaned down and kissed his cheek. "You ready for tomorrow?" He nodded. "More than ready." Hope tugged on his sleeve. "Can I have sparkles in my hair?" Blair answered before he could. "You can have a crown of them." Hope's eyes lit up and she ran off to show Mrs. Kurtz, who was supervising the flower station with a clipboard and a fierce sense of order. Shane wrapped his arm around Blair. "She's going to steal every moment." Blair smiled. "Good, she should." They spent the rest of the afternoon finalizing the last of the details. The ceremony would be held in the greenhouse, surrounded by ivy-draped trellises and hanging orchids, with the reception set under a canopy of twinkling lights in the garden. Every decision had been made together, from the food to the music to the fact that Hope would be walking down the aisle ahead of them, tossing flower petals like confetti. That night, after Hope had been tucked into bed humming a song she'd invented about wedding sparkles, Shane and Blair sat on the balcony of their new brownstone. The city glowed beneath them, stars barely visible beyond the rooftops, but neither noticed. Their world was right there, quiet, close, complete. Blair leaned her head against Shane's shoulder. Do you ever think about what would have happened if I hadn't been late for that flight? All the time, he said. You might have never seen me give up a wall outlet. And I might have never seen a man love his daughter with more grace than most people love themselves. He kissed the top of her head. I didn't fall in love with you because you gave me a job. I know, she said. I fell in love with you because you saw me when no one else did. She looked up at him, her voice soft. And I fell in love with you because you never once needed me to be anyone but myself. They stayed like that until the city quieted, until even the taxis down below seemed to slow. The next morning, the greenhouse glowed with early light. Guests filed in, dressed in soft pastels and muted grays. Hope walked down the aisle in a dress covered in tiny embroidered stars, her curls woven with gold ribbon. She tossed petals with all the solemnity of a monarch, pausing only once to wave at Mrs. Kurtz, who wiped away a tear behind her glasses. Shane stood at the front in a tailored suit the color of slate, his hands steady, his eyes locked on Blair as she entered. She wore ivory, sleek and simple, the train trailing behind her like a whisper. But it wasn't the dress that caught him, it was the way she looked at him, like he was home. Rowan officiated, voice strong and sure, her words weaving their story not just of chance, but of choice. Of deciding every day to love without conditions, to build without fear. They exchanged vows they'd written separately, but somehow ended up echoing each other. Promises of laughter, of patience, of never forgetting how far they'd come. When they kissed, the greenhouse erupted in applause. Hope ran up to hug them both, wrapping her arms around their legs and declaring it the best wedding ever. The reception flowed with warmth, not pomp. Kids played tag between tables, adults danced barefoot by the end of the night. Blair surprised Shane with a slideshow of the Literacy Center's progress, ending with a new wing named after his late mother. He choked up, unable to speak, and simply held her hand tighter. They danced under the stars, not needing music, just motion, just closeness. As the night wound down and the guests began to leave, Shane carried Hope, now half asleep with chocolate frosting on her nose, back into the house. Blair curled beside them on the couch, heels off, dress bunched at her knees. Do we have to go to Italy? She whispered. It's our honeymoon, he said. We kind of should. I'm just saying, she murmured, eyes closing. This is already perfect. He looked at the two of them, his wife and his daughter, and knew she was right. A week later, they stood on a balcony overlooking the Amalfi Coast, the sky streaked with peach and lavender. Hope stayed back with Mrs. Kurtz, who had insisted on giving them their time and had turned out to be an excellent travel companion for a 3-year-old. Blair leaned against the railing, barefoot, a glass of wine in her hand. Shane wrapped his arms around her from behind. Married life treating you okay? She asked. He kissed her shoulder, better than okay. She turned to face him. You know what's wild? What? Every time someone told me I had everything, I nodded and smiled. But I didn't, not until now. He kissed her, slow and certain. Now you do. They stood there as the sun set, the sea below them calm and endless. And for the first time in either of their lives, everything felt exactly as it should.